Hello and welcome back to the port. I'm the Gav Major and this is Admiralty Reports. Admiralty Reports is your gameplay submissions to the channel with my commentary, and today we have a gameplay submission from Eternal Abyss, and he is playing in the Tier 7 Japanese tech tree carrier Shōkaku. So this is the first for the channel where I'm featuring a CV gameplay. And this is a tier 6 and 7 game of domination on Crash Zone. On the enemy team we have an Ashashio, a Z23, a Boise, an Ogochov, a Siegfried, a Nelson, a Champagan, a Massachusetts and a Lexington. On the friendly team we have a Yukikaze, a Lightning, an Ogochov, a Hipper in a division with a Champagan and a Richelieu. Then we have a Scharnhorst, a Colorado and also Eternal Abyss in the Shōkaku. So he spawned on the right and he's sending out his torpedo bombers here. You may have just seen he did a safety drop. Enemy torpedo flight spotted, so he's quickly doing a turn to port, doing a bit of a loop. And when he's on a exit route of this loop, he's going to drop some fighters. Here comes the fighter sports, and that should deal with the enemy torpedo aircraft. Now it's interesting to note that the enemy aircraft carrier does not drop any fighters at this point. Usually carriers like to duke it off. Now here we have the enemy Z23 spotted, so he's going in for a wide torpedo spread. It's one of the nice things with the carriers. You can end up with these kind of semi-unpredictable torpedo spreads, which can be quite good at catching destroyers out, because obviously you're dropping them so close and they're going on such a wide spread. It can be a bit difficult to predict where those torpedoes are going to come from, and then when they do appear, sometimes the destroyer will have a very little amount of time to respond to the incoming torpedoes. Now, one thing to note with Eternal Abyss's gameplay as he plays, you'll note that he does quite a lot of what you call safety drops. That's where you just drop some of your torpedoes into the sea at a safe distance from the enemy, not with the intention of torpedoing anything, but simply just to send free aircraft back to the carrier. Here up at tier 7 I should say, rather than your group of 6 aircraft being broken down into 3 groups of 2, they're now broken down into 2 groups of 3. So that means each torpedo drop will drop 3 torpedoes, which is obviously more torpedoes in the water to obviously get more hits. So while he continues his little bit of play and he plays around with his autopilot, it's obvious that the enemy team is pushing quite hard for the Charlie objective as the friendly team captures Bravo. We'll have a little bit of a discussion regarding the Shōkaku historically. So Shōkaku, also if you translate the Japanese, known for soaring crane is the actual translation, is an aircraft carrier of the Japanese Navy, and she was the lead ship of her class. She had a sister ship called the Shōkaku, and Shōkaku took part in several key naval battles of the Pacific War, including the attack on Pearl Harbor, Battle of the Coral Sea, Battle of Santa Cruz Island, before being torpedoed by an American submarine at the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Now, the Shōkaku class carriers were part of the same program that included the Yamato class battleships, which were no longer restricted by the provisions of the Washington Naval Treaty, which for Japan expired in December 1936. Therefore, Japan was free to incorporate all the features that they deemed desirable for an aircraft carrier, namely high speed, long duration, as in like how far they could go from the mainland, and along with heavy protection and a large aircraft carrying capacity. Shōkaku was laid down in December 1937 and launched in June 1939, commissioned in August 1941. Now, during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, she was struck at about 11:22 on the 19th of June by 3, possibly 4 torpedoes fired by the submarine users Kavala. Now, as Shōkaku had been in the process of refueling and rearming her aircraft, it meant she was in a very precarious situation, and the torpedoes did start a number of fires aboard the ship. At about 10 past noon, an aerial bomb exploded and detonated aviation fuel vapours, which spread the fire throughout the ship. The order to abandon the ship was given, but before the evacuation could really start to progress, Shōkaku abruptly took on water forward and sank quickly by the bow. Now, she went down, taking 1,272 of her crew with her. The light cruiser Yukagi and 3 destroyers rescued the captain along with 570 men. So there you go, Eternal's managed to get his first kill, getting a torpedo on the bow of the Shashio, and here we have the Z-23, so potentially we could be lining ourselves up for kill number 2. This is what I mean, the really nice bit of the unpredictable spread of the torpedoes when you have that widespread, one on the far right and one on the far left, and then one vaguely down the centre, but that one can shift. So down at say tier 3 and tier 5, when you're dropping torpedoes with only 2 aircraft, if you have a wide spread like that, you'll end up with one on the far left and one on the far right and a big void in the middle. Whereas at tier 7 you end up with that odd additional stray torpedo, so he's able to secure himself kill number 2 on the Z-23. So looking at the way that the map has progressed and looking at the teams, the Total's team's lost 2 battleships, whereas the enemy team has lost 2 destroyers. So partially I would say that it's advantage Eternal Abyss's team, and the way that they have quite a lot of map control, they've managed to... Well, A was always theirs, they've been able to secure B, they're in the process of securing C, although I'm not sure how successful that's going to be. Now he has used 2 of his fighter call-ins so far. He's still got 2 left, and he's been able to shoot down 3 aircraft. So with Eternal's team getting all 3 caps, they should be in a nice advantage to pull away on the points here. So as always, down in the description will be the commander and the modules if they are of interest. Commander wise, he's gone for Yamaguchi, rank 14, legendary 2. Skills, swatting flies, one-way ticket, hidden threat, burn baby burn, and fully packed. So hence he's been able to get additional fighter consumables on his aircraft carrier and also on his flights. Here he's just doing a safety drop because noting that there's a Shōkaku, Massachusetts and a Boise all close together there, so they're going to be able to really mulch up aircraft, so he doesn't want to sacrifice too many aircraft going in there. Inspirations wise, he's taken Tanaka at Mastery 19 and Space Fishery for Mastery 13, which means he's obviously getting more bang for his buck out of his torpedoes, and those torpedoes are going to travel faster, which means the reaction time that the enemy are going to have to the incoming torpedoes is reduced. Space Fishery is definitely one of the commanders I go for. So here he's sending that flight straight in between a Boise and Shōkaku, and he's managed to get away scot-free there and get some torpedoes away on the Shōkaku. Now modules wise, he's taken Flight Control Module 1, Air Groups Module 2, Concealment Systems Module 1 and Air Groups Module 3. So very similar choices to what I would go for myself. Focus your carrier as much as you can around your ability to regain aircraft, aircraft speed, aircraft HP, and only really do concealment and secondaries and AA if you don't have a choice. At the end of the day, the aircraft carrier is going to be playing a bit further back. It's already got fighter protection. You have the ability to call additional fighter protection in on it, so sometimes it's not really worth going for the AA mods. Here he's going to make a run on this Boise, which has approximately 20,000 HP. It looks like a very nice torpedo drop. And there we go, devastating strike and kill number 3. So, using the autopilot just to keep his aircraft carrier moving, keeping behind his team obviously for protection, keeping concealed obviously for protection, but also trying to keep within a reasonable distance from the enemy team so that means he can shorten his flight times. Here we are, going for another safety drop. As obviously we have the Massachusetts over there. The Massachusetts will have a very good anti-aircraft component. Got to remember, the Massachusetts secondaries are all dual-purpose guns, and therefore they will throw up a lot of flat clouds. However, thankfully, the Shōkaku is the slightly closer ship, so we don't have to really go too near the Massachusetts on this approach. Getting the torpedoes away early, and instantly launching another flight. So this is one thing you'll note with Eternal Abyss's playthrough here, is he's always just straight away, up goes the next flight, up goes the next flight. Getting a flooding on the Champagne, however, it doesn't stick, but that does mean that she's damage controlled. And it looks like she may have taken a hit from the lightning, not quite sure. Not going for a safety drop this time, so we're committing with all 6 of our aircraft. And again, lining up on the broadside of the Champagne. Now, you note that he's leading quite a lot on the Champagne, the reason being is obviously the Champagne being quite a fast French battleship. You just need to lead that bit more. Getting 2 floodings on the Champagne, and we know that she damaged Con, so there you go, she's flooding up nicely. Swinging the second flight around and going in for a second approach. It's amusing to note that the enemy aircraft carrier still hasn't tried to impede or turn Abyss in any way by dropping fighters. Nice widespread of torpedoes, should get maybe 1, not getting 2, and kill number 4. Enemies just started to cap the Charlie objective. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. The enemy team does appear to have the advantage at the moment, retaining 2 cruisers and 2 battleships, versus Eternal's team of only 2 cruisers and 1 destroyer. Obviously both teams still retain their carriers. This looks like another safety drop. Yep, there we go. So this one's quite hard to say where the advantage is, because it all depends on how much HP their ships still have. Making a run on Massachusetts. Another good reason for why he's done that safety drop, not having to lead so much, because obviously the Massachusetts is a bit slower than the Champagne. Getting 2 torpedo hits. Let's see, the Massachusetts still got about 1/3 health, Nelson's on about under a quarter, Siegfried's about half health, and then there should be an Okochov, I believe. Going for another safety drop. So depending on how quickly this turns around, it could be advantage enemy team if they start mopping up cruisers on Eternal's team, and then you might be in a situation where you might be concerned, especially if the enemy team's retaining a carrier and battleships. Because even though the enemy team don't have destroyers, they still retain their carrier, which would be capable of doing sufficient spotting. Making a run on the Massachusetts as we lose both of our cruisers, so it's literally just Eternal, and I believe it's the Friendly Lightning versus an Okochov, a Siegfried, Massachusetts, and a Nelson. Now, obviously, it's now looking a bit quite favourable, I guess you could say, because the Massachusetts is quite weak. The Nelson's already been worked over. I didn't quite get to see the amount of HP that the enemy Okochov still had. Now here, this is where the enemy carrier should drop a fighter consumable, but he just doesn't seem to want to assist his team. Now Turner's gone and dropped a fighter consumable there to try and assist some protection to the Lightning, so even though he's going out there, going after the kills and the damage, he's still dropping fighter consumables to assist his team, and at the start of the game you saw him do quite a lot of spotting assistance for his team by going after those destroyers. Getting 2 hits on the Siegfried and going for a cheeky second run with a second flight on the Nelson, losing an aircraft and hoping that maybe the widespread might throw a single torpedo onto the far right against the Nelson. Now throughout this game he's been able to launch completely full torpedo flights, and there that fighter consumable eating up 5 of the aircraft from the enemy aircraft carrier, assisting in the protecting the Lightning, but it looks like the enemy carrier has decided to pick you out as a target. So 1 lonely dive bomber's coming up against your carrier, and you shoot that down. There's a Siegfried. Siegfried's looking nice and weak at the moment, so this is quite an opportunistic kill. And it's worth noting that the Okochov is just behind, so it's potential that we can do 1 drop on the Siegfried here, and then we can almost bounce our flight over onto the next target. When you're in a carrier, sometimes trying to spot these situations where you can do a drop on one, and then with the second flight make a drop on a second one, almost in like a chain reaction, is always quite nice. Getting himself kill number 5 and Kraken Unleashed, making a drop on this Okochov, which looks pretty weak. There we go, kill number 6, very nice. That just leaves this Nelson. So, it looks like Eternal's managed to turn it around quite nicely for his team there, almost securing the advantage that they had gained earlier in the game. Obviously his team still retaining the 2 caps, the Lightning working away, while Eternal's doing the spotting of the Nelson. And the Nelson's, I think we're only going to have time for 1 more torpedo drop on this Nelson. There's only 30 seconds left. I don't think we're going to have time to loop it round and get the second flight in there. Lining up nicely. Way loose torpedoes. With 20 seconds of the game, with 40 points left until win. We secure a kill number 7. Now, it's worth remembering that this was all captured before the introduction of the new consumable called evasive maneuvers. Now, evasive maneuvers is a new consumable that's coming to tier 7 carriers of all nations, where for 6 seconds your aircraft will be immune to incoming damage. Now, during that game, Eternal did 18 combat drops, I should say. Now, by a combat drop, I mean aircraft going in against the target with ordnance loaded. Now, during those 18 combat drops, how many aircraft do you think he lost? Now, considering this is before evasive maneuvers, before he can make his aircraft immune to incoming damage if he so wishes, he lost 1 aircraft. In that entire game, he lost only 1 aircraft, which was combat effective, which was carrying ordnance. Now, he may have lost more aircraft, but those aircraft are no longer combat effective. They are no longer carrying ordnance. And therefore, losing a non-combat effective aircraft doesn't really hurt the carrier too much, because he's still regenerating aircraft and he's still got loads of aircraft back at base, or back on the carrier, I should say. So it's quite amusing to think that before the introduction of this kind of a immunity to your aircraft, he only lost 1 during that game. Well, let's take a look at the end scores and see how he did. So here we are at the end screen. He's managed to do 116,000 damage. Now, during that entire game, he only ever used his torpedo aircraft as well. And from those torpedo aircraft, he managed to get 24 hits on target and 7 flooding, along with 2 incapacitations. Now, through the use of his call-in fighters that he could use with his aircraft flights, he managed to shoot down 8 of the enemy aircraft, and from aircraft that tried to attack his carrier, he managed to shoot down a further 3 aircraft. Managed to get himself Devastating Strike and Kraken Unleashed. Going on to the team scores, and it's probably by no surprise he's managed to come top of his team with 7 kills, earning a total amount of ship XP of 2,929. That includes a 1.5 multiplier, and it does place him a good 700 more, maybe 700, 600 more than the next best player on his team. Looking at the enemy team, it's worth noting that their carrier only came 6th place. So I guess it just kind of showed the disparity between the skill levels of the carriers, especially Eternal, very good player. Going on to the comment screen, he's been able to walk away with a total profit of 376,000 credits with a premium account, and that is after a ship service cost of 150,000 credits. Well, I hope you have enjoyed seeing how to play a carrier properly, especially at tier 7, and I hope that this is probably an example of a case where we do not need evasive maneuvers. Anyway, if you have enjoyed it, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy this kind of content, feel free to subscribe. If you have any of your own game captures that you'd like to submit for these community spotlight videos, then the email address is down in the description, along with the command build and the modules used by the player, in this case Eternal Bliss, and also the link to Patreon if you want to support the channel. And Patreon is a non-monetized channel. Until next time, I'm the Galloping Major, and back to the port.
Hey, hey, clear the way, here comes the Galloping Major. Get out of the way there, you fellows, unless you want me to run you down. I guess this is the life. Now, hey, hey, clear the way, here comes the Galloping Major.